الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم إنك ترى مكاننا وتسمع كلامنا، اللهم فاشهد أننا ما حضرنا هذا المجلس إلا ابتغاء وجهك واجتناب سخطك يا رب العالمين. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل، اللهم اجعلنا من أهل القرآن الذين هم أهلك وخاصتك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Continuing on our lessons with Sūrat Yasin, we're going to be covering verses number 11 and 12 today. But before I begin, there's a beautiful story that I was actually reading about in the morning of one of the senior muhaddithun and scholars of hadith that used to reside in Mecca al-Mukarramah, and he's buried there. His name was Sheikh Sayyid Muhammad ibn Alawi al-Maliki. He received his PhD from Al-Azhar when he was still in his mid-20s. So this was a very, very incredible scholar. He has many, many works published. And he was what I consider someone from the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of his students relates that he passed away in 2004. And he was buried in Maqbarat al-Mu'alla, which is in Mecca, where our mother Khadija radiallahu anha is also buried. Okay? And it's a norm in Saudi that because there's that small platform and small grave where you have hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of bodies being buried there throughout the years. And because bodies naturally decompose, sometimes they reuse those same graves. And so one of the close students of Sheikh Muhammad Alawi from Palembang, I think it's a place in Indonesia, I'm not sure, I didn't check. Sheikh Habib Abdul Hamid, who accompanied him for many years, he mentioned that they opened his grave 3 different times, and each time they opened it, they saw that his body was in the exact condition that he was buried in, subhanAllah. And so when I heard this, I immediately called one of my teachers, who was his student when I heard this. And I said, is this true, Sheikh? Like, you were his student, you've been living in Mecca, Medina your whole entire life. He said, yeah, this is actually well known in Mecca and Medina, that sometimes they'll uncover graves, they'll see it, the bodies are completely as they are. And this is something that's like mutawatir, like something that is like mass transmitted. People just know this, especially in regards to the scholars. You all know there's a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, إِنَّ اللَّهَ حَرَّمَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ أَن تَأْكُلَ أَجْسَادَ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't allow for the bodies of the prophets to be decomposed and eaten up by the earth, right? So that's for the prophets, and we know that for sure. And we know from another hadith, al-ulama warathatul anbiya, that the scholars are the true inheritors of the prophets. So a quality and a thing that they also inherit, that sometimes if they have a very close station with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it isn't above Him in His majesty that He also leaves some of these scholars in their bodily form. And so there was a very famous sheikh, his name was Sheikh Isa al-Bayanuni. Okay, he was one of the great scholars of Sham. He saw in his dream Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam coming to him and saying, we have prepared a place for you with us. After that, the sheikh, he went to Mecca for Hajj, and then he went and visited Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina. 3 days after that visit, he fell ill and he passed away in Medina. He was buried in Baqi'. Years later, when they went to go use that grave then to bury someone else, because the body is supposed to be what? Decomposed. And they found the body of the sheikh to be as it is. And there's lines of poetry that are attributed to him, Allahu alam. جسد تمكن حب أحمد فيه تالله أن الأرض لا تبليه أو كيف يبليه التراب وحبه في قلبه ومدحه في فيه أكثر عليه من الصلاة صلى الله عليه وسلم فإنها نور لقبرك عندما تأويه. Translation, loose translation, a body in which the love of Ahmad, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, has settled, by Allah the earth will not consume it. How could the earth consume him when the love of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is in his heart and his praise is on his lips? Send abundant blessings upon him sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for they are a light for your grave when you enter it. Subhanallah. There's a story that's mentioned in Al-Fawaid al-Bahiyya, which is a collection of biographies of Hanafi scholars, okay? Al-Fawaid al-Bahiyya fi Tarajim al-Hanafiyya. And they mention in this encyclopedic work that gathers the biographies of these different Hanafi scholars over the centuries, that there was a student who saw, he heard that the scholars' bodies are not decomposed and they remain as they are. So he was like, you know what, my teacher passed away, let me go check. And so he uncovered the grave of his teacher to just check. And he found that the body of his teacher years later was as it was. And so of course, you cannot do that. You're not allowed to do that, right? And so he saw his teacher in a dream. And he said, Subhanallah, you're not going to believe unless you see. And he made dua against him. And he lost his eyesight. Then he went to Makkah al-Mukarramah and he did tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his eyesight returned. This is mentioned in the books, by the way. So you see these very, very incredible stories. And I'm told by my teacher that in Makkah and Medina, because they're always using baqir, now they're expanding baqir actually, that whenever they reuse graves, if they see the grave, the body is still as it is, which happens a lot apparently, they put a sign that ishara, okay, that we're not going to use that grave. This grave is, leave it to the side. Subhanallah. Okay, now going to Sūrat Yasin, inshallah. I'll begin with the tilawa and then we'll go into the tafsir. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين صدق الله العظيم. So going into these two verses, because we've covered the verses before, I'll read the translation, then we'll go into the tafsir. You know why it's called dhubab, this fly? Why is it called dhubab? Dhubab in Arabic. Kullama dhubba, every time you push it away, it returns back. Aba. Kullama dhubba, you push it away, aba, it returns back to you. And they were asked, what's the wisdom behind Allah creating the fly, the dhubab? Why? To humble those people that are arrogant. So this is what the scholars mention. إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم. Translation, then tafsir. You can only warn those who follow the reminder, the Quran, and are in awe of the most compassionate without seeing him. So give them good news of forgiveness and an honorable reward. Okay. So in the ayah before, or in the ayat before, we were talking about the what? The disbelievers that are blocked off from seeing the truth, and that the verdict has been passed against them. لَقَدْ حَقَّ الْقَوْلُ عَلَى أَكْثَرِهِمْ. They were arrogant. They had shackles up to their necks, pushing their heads up, just as they were not humble enough to put their heads down and listen to the truth. They were arrogant. They were blocked from light. Those are people that are not going to benefit from the warning. But when the Prophet ﷺ does do the warning, who is it going to benefit? The believers. Not just the believers, but also those that listen and have hearts and their hearts aren't dead, and then they change their faith to Islam. Okay. إِنَّمَا تُنذِرُ مَنِ اتَّبَعَ. Ittaba'a is past tense or present tense? Past tense. Khashiyah, past tense or present tense? Past tense. Okay. So how can this ayah be applied? إِنَّمَا تُنذِرُ Ya Rasulullah. You are only warning man ittaba'a, past tense, who followed, okay, past tense, al-dhikr wa khashya, and had fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ar-Rahman. How could this apply to those people that they haven't heard about Islam yet, but when they hear it, Allah will open their hearts and then they will change their faith? How could it be applied to them? How could they be included when it's past tense? Because the Quran sometimes uses the past tense for things yet to happen in the future. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala many times He talks about, let's say, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَكْتُمُونَ مَا أَنزَلْنَا, until the end of the ayah, أُولَٰئِكَ يَلْعَنُهُمُ اللَّهُ. It's present tense at the beginning, present tense. And then He says, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ, except those, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ تَابُوا. Tabu is past tense, right? Isn't it past tense? Taba, yatubu, taba, tabu, past tense. So why would He indicate something to happen in the future which hasn't happened yet in the past tense? Because that's just how the Quran uses it. So it does this warning. It's not just for the believers, but also those that have live hearts, that are willing to listen, that are willing to humble themselves and to change their faith. Okay? The next thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse, He says, إِنَّمَا تُنذِرُ. You only warn مَنِ اتَّبَعَ الذِّكْرِ, who follow the remembrance. Okay. How can we reconcile this verse with the verse before that says the Prophet ﷺ, he warns everyone, لِتُنذِرَ قَوْمًا, that you warn a people, a nation, قَوْمًا, لِتُنذِرَ قَوْمًا, which is for everyone. And over here, it's specifically, especially only for the believers. Is He only warning the believers? Is He only warning them? What does it mean here? What's intended? إِنَّمَا تُنذِرُ مَنِ اتَّبَعَ. You only warn those that follow the reminder. Why is it only? What is it trying to give? Allah. They are the only people that are benefiting from the warning. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, look how He even says it. He says, إِنَّمَا تُنذِرُ مَنْ تَبِعَ or اتَّبَعَ. اتَّبَعَ. There's a shadda. So they not only follow the Quran, but they closely follow the remembrance. Dhikr is Quran. It could also be any maw'idha, wa'adh, a reminder. Okay, that all falls under dhikr. Okay, dhikr also was actually used for the previous scriptures as well. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ. Who are they? The people of the Torah and the Injil. وَلَقَدْ كَتَبْنَا فِي الزَّبُورِ مِنْ بَعْدِ الذِّكْرِ. Al-dhikr over here is referring to Torah. Okay, so the dhikr was also used for these different things. So, مَنِ اتَّبَعَ الذِّكْرَ, who closely follow the Quran. They listen to it, they hear it, they abide by it. Any possible way you could think of implementing this ayah, it would fall under مَنِ اتَّبَعَ الذِّكْرَ, those that closely follow the remembrance. Okay. How can the Quran be a dhikr? A dhikr which is something that is full of remembrance. Remembrance means you're being reminded of it, right? But aren't there things in the Quran that we don't know? There's a lot of things that we don't know. There's a lot of words, vocabs, ahkam, whatever it may be. So how are things in the Quran there that we don't know and still be a remembrance? Because all of those things that are in the Quran, they are in sync with our natural human disposition, our fitrah. Okay? It's not coming from something that is not in line with our natural disposition. So it is a remembrance, actually. It is a remembrance. It's a reminder of the covenant that we took with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, مَنِ اتَّبَعَ الذِّكْرَ. إِنَّمَا تُنذِرُ Ya Rasulullah, you only remind مَنِ اتَّبَعَ الذِّكْرَ. وَخَشِيَ الرَّحْمَنَ بِالْغَيْبِ. Khashiyah comes in different ways. Khashiyah 8 times, and in the verb form 40 times. Okay? So khashiya, 48 times it comes in the Quran. Khashya is, or over here, wa khashiya ar-Rahman, is the most intense form of fear. Not just any fear, but the most intense form of fear. Ashaddul khawf. Okay, khashya. It is fear that is mixed with also reverence for the one that is to be feared. And it's not based off of ignorance, but it is based off of knowledge that you're fearing this. Okay, that it's based off of knowledge. That's what khashya is. It's the most intense form, and it's based off of knowledge. That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He specifically attributes khashya to who in the Quran? إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. He specifically attributes khashya, the most intense form of fear of Allah Azza wa Jal, with knowledge. He attributes it to the scholars. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. In the Arabic language, if you say shajaratun khashiyatun, it means a dried up tree. A dried up tree. Khashiya, jaffa. Just like that, a human being, he becomes so scared that it's as though the life drains out of him. Subhanallah. So shajara khashiya, a dried up tree. A human that has khashya towards Allah, he's so scared it's as though the life drains out of him. Okay. Khashiya ar-Rahman. What is Rahman? We always hear this name of Allah Azza wa Jal on the pattern of fa'lan. There's a difference between Rahman, Rahim. Every day, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. But Rahman is not the same as Rahim. They're not the same. Rahman is sifa mushabbaha for mubalagha, okay? Which gives the meaning of imtila, to be completely filled. Example, when you want to say someone is very angry, you say they are Arab sisters. Not Arab sister. Arab means anyone who speaks Arabic or learns Arabic. Huh? How do you say someone's angry? Ghadban. Right? You say ghadban. Why do you say ghadban? Because they're full, it's as though smoke is about to come out of their ears. Ghadban. Or if you say you're full, you say shab'an, khalas, I'm too full. I had way too much food, shab'an. Completely full. So when you're saying Rahman, it's as though you're saying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His mercy wasi'at kull shay. His mercy extends to everything. He's the most merciful, the entirely merciful. It's not correct to say full of mercy. You wouldn't say full of mercy, because then you're kind of giving a weird depiction. You would say, but the most merciful, the entire merciful. When you say Rahim, this is a quality that is, for thubut, a quality that remains. For example, if you want to describe someone as tall, you would say that they are? How do you say someone is tall in Arabic? Tawil. Tawil. Because you don't become tall today and you're short tomorrow. No, you're tall. If you say someone is short, qasir. Fa'il, right? So Rahim, it's a quality of rahmah that remains with Him Azza wa Jal. But Rahman is a name that is only for Him, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, bil mu'minina ra'ufur rahim. Ra'ufun rahim. That's a quality that's also described to the Prophet. But Rahman is only for Allah Azza wa Jal. Now an important question comes. Why would Allah tie fear to Rahman? Wa khashiyar Rahman. And these believers, they have fear, this most intense form of fear with reverence towards Rahman. But isn't Rahman one of His beautiful names that calls you to His mercy? It's as though there's several points to take and derive from just this point. Why is He tying Rahman to fear? He fears Rahman even though that name calls for hope, because he is afraid, the slave and the servant is afraid that what he has been blessed with and given as a mercy will be taken away. وَخَشْيَ الرَّحْمَنِ. Doesn't want to take advantage. Another point that the scholars mention is that because those that don't fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they only have false hope and mercy, they're less likely to do good. So Allah is telling you that even though I'm Rahman, have fear of me. So a believer is balanced between mercy and fear, the two wings. So you cannot just have mercy, 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 khalas. No, that mercy must come with fear. And if you remember in the last, not the last lecture, but the one before, verses 5 to 7, I went and detailed that this surah the entire theme of this surah goes back to two names of Allah Azza wa Jal. Who remembers what these two names were? No, not Hakim is Al-Aziz Ar-Rahim. Al-Aziz Ar-Rahim. This entire surah, you'll find themes of Allah's Azza, Jalla Jalalu, and also His Rahmah, Jalla Jalalu, right? And so this ayah, Ar-Rahman is mentioned, and Khashya is mentioned, because Al-Aziz, He must be feared. So throughout the surah, you find these two names coming, Al-Aziz Ar-Rahim, Targheeb and Tarheeb. Encouragement to do good, and also warning you that if you don't, this is the result, okay? وَخَشْيَ الرَّحْمَنَ بِالْغَيْبِ. He fears Allah in the unseen. This is the true mark of a righteous person. That they don't just fear Allah in front of people, but they know that Allah is always watching them and always aware of what they do. So they worship Him. أَن تَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ. You worship Allah as though you see Him. فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ. And if you're not at that level, then know that He sees you. فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ. فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ. So worshipping Allah Azza wa Jalla and having khashya of Him and having fear of Him in the unseen. You know, there's always this beautiful nasheed that I whenever this thing comes up, they say, Sirru salahi salahu sir, wa salahu sirri sirru salah. The secret to righteousness, this is an easy thing to remember. The secret to righteousness is righteousness in secret. Beautiful, short, right to the point. The secret to righteousness is righteousness in secret. There's that beautiful nasheed by Mishari. هل لك سر عند الله بينك أنت وبين الله هل لك صدقات تخفى لا يعلمها إلا الله قصص لا تكشف إلا بكتابك حين ترى الله. So the line goes, هل لك سر عند الله. Do you have any secrets with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So the believer, he doesn't just do things in front of people, but he is also righteous in his private affairs. May Allah make us from those people, Ya Rab. Bil ghaib can go both ways. Okay? This is lost in translation. Again, translation, you cannot do justice to the Quran with just simple translations. You have to go deep diving. The mahdhuf over here can be either attached to the fa'il, the doer, or the maf'ul, explaining this is how it would be understood. وَخَشِيَ الرَّحْمَنَ بِالْغَيْبِ. He has fear of Ar-Rahman bil-Ghayb. What does bil-Ghayb mean? In the unseen, how? It could either mean that he fears Ar-Rahman whilst being unseen by the eyes of people. This is what we understood. This is what usually translations capture, and this is what is understood. But it could also mean that he fears the punishment of Ar-Rahman whilst the punishment was unseen by him. Whilst that side, Ar-Rahman is unseen to him, the punishment is unseen to him. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. That this slave, he not knowing this, not seeing this, it's enough for him that he has fear of Allah Azza wa Jalla. وَخَشِيَ الرَّحْمَنَ بِالْغَيْبِ. Meaning, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. They have iman with the unseen. You see how both ways can be understood? That they have fear of Ar-Rahman bil-Ghayb, whilst they themselves are being unseen by people, and whilst they themselves are unable to see the realities of the next world, the realities of the punishment, and they're still having fear of Ar-Rahman. Because that is a high station that the believers have. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then He says, فَبَشِّرْهُ بِمَغْفِرَةٍ وَأَجْرٍ كَرِيمٍ. Bashir is stronger than abshir. Okay? Bashir is a stronger word. Al-Raghib al-Asfahani, he mentions that when you use bashara, yubashiru, bashir, it's more encompassing, more general, and it's really intense. So give them really good glad tidings. Okay? And how do you say skin? Bashara, right? Ana wa anti, we're bashar, we're people, we're humans. Where does that come from? Okay? So when you say bishara, giving someone good news, or even bad news, okay, is because when someone gives you good news, what usually happens to your face? What usually happens to you? Facial expressions change. Your body changes itself. The facial expression changes, right? So that's why it's called bishara. That's why it's called bishara. That's why it comes from these root letters. Okay? فَبَشِّرْهُ, give them the good news, give them the glad tidings with what? بِمَغْفِرَةٍ وَأَجْرٍ كَرِيمٍ. Both of them, بِمَغْفِرَةٍ and أَجْر كَرِيم, are in the state of nakira, indefinite. Okay? Meaning that there's no alif lam attached to it. Sometimes nakira can come with different usages that requires a longer discussion. I've mentioned it in the first halaqah of Sūrat Yasin. If you remember regarding ala sirat al-mustaqim, all of the different usages of tankid, you might refer to it there. Over here, it's lit-ta'zeem, meaning not just any forgiveness, but a great forgiveness and a great, vast, beautiful, noble reward. وَأَجْرٍ كَرِيمٍ. It fits under the ayah, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَيْبِ. Those that fear their Lord with the unseen, lahum maghfirah, will have forgiveness and a great reward. You see? So a great forgiveness and a great noble reward. Why is it called forgiveness for their sins, ajr kareem, for the good deeds that they do? Why is it called ajr kareem? Why is it kareem? Allah says Rasul kareem, arsh kareem, rizqun kareem, kitabun kareem. It just means noble. Kareem of something is the absolute pinnacle and best of it. The best of it. That is what it means, ajr kareem. The best of something. The best reward that you could possibly imagine. That is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set for those believers that have fear of Him, ar-Rahman bil-Ghayb, and they follow man ittaba'a dhikr. Look how beautiful this ayah is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions two rewards, maghfirah and ajr kareem, after He mentions two different forms of ibadah. Following the dhikr, man ittaba'a dhikr, okay, which is an apparent ibadah that a person will do, following and implementing the Quran and the maw'idah and the wa'adh. And then what happens in the heart? Fearing ar-Rahman. So two rewards after mentioning two different forms of ibadah. So there is a warning and there's glad tidings for those that didn't benefit from the warning. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, leave them for the akhirah, and then they will see the next ayah, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى وَنَكْتُبُ مَا قَدَّمُوا وَآثَارَهُمْ وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ أَحْصَيْنَاهُ فِي إِمَامٍ مُبِينٍ. Translation, then tafsir. It is certainly we who resurrect the dead and write what they send forth and what they leave behind. Everything is listed by us in a perfect record. Okay, that perfect record is what? Al-Lawh al-Mahfuz. إِنَّا نَحْنُ نُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى. We are the ones who resurrect the dead. We bring the dead back to life. This could be understood literally, sarih, bringing back to life and resurrecting them from their graves after their passing for judgment. Or it could be metaphorically, kinaya, meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings life to the heart after it was dead. He brings life, meaning that He brings Islam to the heart when there was once kufr in it. He brings Quran when there was no Quran. So metaphorically, inna nahnu nuhyi al-mawta. Okay? So those that didn't benefit from the warning, it's as though they are dead, because they're not benefiting from those things that the live hearts are. Okay? Inna nahnu. Two ways of expressing emphasis and exclusivity. Inna, harf, we already know that's for emphasis. Inna nahnu nuhyi. He could have just said inna nuhyi al-mawta. Or nahnu nuhyi al-mawta. He says inna nahnu, we. Inna nahnu nuhyi al-mawta. So this is a way in Arabic language to express emphasis and exclusivity that none other than Him Azza wa Jal are those that bring life and resurrect after death. No matter how much science gets advanced, they will never be able to bring the dead back to life, ever, mustahil. Okay? Inna nahnu nuhyi al-mawta wa naktubu ma qaddamu, and we write what they have sent forth from the dunya, good or bad, righteous deeds and sins. Okay? Ma qaddamu, what they have put forth. You know, qaddamtu laka hadha, what I have put forth for you, right? Alimat nafsum ma qaddamat, what they have put forth from righteous deeds or bad deeds, whatever it may be, both ways. وَنَكْتُبُ مَا قَدَّمُوا وَآثَارَهُمْ, and what they have left behind, good or bad. So وَآثَارَهُمْ are the traces that we leave behind, the legacy that we leave behind, the masjid that we might build, the students that we might teach, the children that we might raise, all of the things that fall under and follow us after our grave. There's a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Man sanna fil Islami sunnatan hasana. Whoever, brings a beautiful practice into Islam, not an innovation, but something that is found within the tradition, and people after him follow that thing that he introduces. Like, let's say you start a class in the masjid and people start attending, and then let's say you perhaps pass on or something might happen, and people are still continuing that practice, you're still getting the reward for that. Subhanallah. So, and people continue to do that after, that person will be getting the reward, and the initial person, they will be also getting the reward of everyone who practices it after. So let's say you build a masjid. People 100, 200, 300, 400 years later are still praying in that masjid. Subhanallah, imagine all of that reward just from your small donation or whatever effort you might have put in, you're still getting from that. And those people that are praying, none of their reward is being touched. That is وَآثَارَهُمْ. Or whoever does a bad practice, you influence people to do bad and evil. And subhanallah, each time someone does that evil, that listens to that song or might do that thing or whatever it may be, then not only will you be getting the sin that you did first and foremost, but every time that person or another person and all of those people that they influence, it goes back to the person that started it, initiated it. They will be getting the sin, and this person will also be getting the sin. So we ask Allah for us to leave athar that are hasana, tayyiba. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of these things are being written and recorded. وَنَكْتُبُ مَا قَدَّمُوا وَآثَارَهُمْ. And some of the mufassirun even mention in regards to this that there's steps and traces that they go to the masjid. There's a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam where there were some plots vacant around the masjid. There was a tribe, they wanted to move closer to the masjid. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he hears of this, Ibn Salama, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he tells them, don't do this. He advises against it. Why? Because diyarukum tuktabu atharukum. That the homes, live in your homes because your steps are being recorded. Every step that you take towards the masjid, you're getting reward for that. Every mile you drive, every minute you drive, all of that, you're getting reward for it. Diyarukum tuktabu atharukum. So even when we walk towards good, even when we walk towards the masjid, walk towards a Quran class, a tafsir class, whatever it may be, all of these, وَنَكْتُبُ مَا قَدَّمُوا وَآثَارَهُمْ. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ أَحْصَيْنَاهُ فِي إِمَامٍ مُبِينٍ. Look at this, subhanallah. He mentions وَنَكْتُبُ مَا قَدَّمُوا. He mentions وَنَكْتُبُ in what? Is that present tense or past tense? Present tense. That we write. Because aren't the angels still recording? Yeah, they're recording. Right now they're recording. They're seeing what is AbdulRazzak doing? What is Dua doing? What is this person doing? What is this person doing? They're always writing. وَنَكْتُبُ. Well, over here he says, وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ, everything, أَحْصَيْنَاهُ, past tense. Why? Because what is recorded in al-lawh al-mahfuz, is it still being written or is it already set and sealed? Sealed. It's already sealed. جَفَّتِ الصُّحُفِ. It's already, the pens have already written everything down and everything has been recorded and now the pages are dry. وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ أَحْصَيْنَاهُ. Okay? فِي إِمَامٍ مُبِينٍ. Why is al-lawh al-mahfuz called Imam Mubin? Why is it called Imam? An Imam in Salah, what does he do? He leads you in Salah. Same thing, al-lawh al-mahfuz, everything follows its accord. So everything is behind it. That's why it's called Imam Mubin. Lawh al-mahfuz is Imam because everything is following its accord. The angels are following it. Everything is behind it. Mubin meaning it's absolutely clear. So those are the two verses for today. But I want to really tie a point towards وَخَشْيَ الرَّحْمَنَ بِالْغَيْبِ, that they fear ar-Rahman bil-Ghayb. There's a few steps, and this is a takeaway point that we can all take, inshallah. And I mentioned this in Ramadan, and I'm going to repeat it again. After tawbah, everyone knows that if I make a mistake, I do tawbah. But really, rarely do you hear people talk about what to do after. Imam al-Ghazali refers to it, and many other scholars refer to it. The four memes after tawbah. Musharata, muraqaba, muhasaba, mu'aqaba. Musharata is that every day you make a shart. Every day you wake up and you make a covenant with yourself that today I'm not going to listen to music, I'm not going to do haram, I'm not going to look at haram, I'm not going to eat haram, I'm not going to speak haram, I'm not going to walk towards haram, I'm not going to speak ill, I'm going to do nice, whatever it may be. Musharata. You make a covenant with yourself every day or the night before. That's musharata. Okay? And then the second step, the second meme is called muraqabah. That you're constantly, it comes from muraqabah, you're always looking for your own faults. You're always busy looking at your own actions. You don't have time to look for other people. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ رَقِيبًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is raqib over us. Kiraman katibin, they're recording everything. So having muraqabah of yourself throughout the day. Looking out for your own actions. What am I doing? Am I doing okay? Constantly busying yourself. People are so busy looking at the faults of others that they forget to look at the mirror and look at themselves. If we were busy looking at our own faults, we will never have time to criticize others or look at their faults. Muraqabah. The third meme is muhasabah. That at the end of the day, you see, how did I do today? Oh, I wasted an hour watching TV. Oh, I backbited. Oh, I did this thing, I shouldn't have said that thing. I probably hurt their feelings. Whatever it may be, muhasabah, holding yourselves to account. The statement of Umar, حاسبوا أنفسكم, statement of Umar or hadith, I forget. No, he said, yeah, حاسبوا أنفسكم قبل أن تحاسبوا. I have to check. But basically, do hisab and take account of yourself before Allah takes account of you and you're held accountable for. Okay? So right now we still have the chance. So do muhasabah. That's number 3. And number 4, the last thing is called mu'aqabah. Self-disciplining yourself. Anywhere that you commit a crime, there are punishments. You go against laws, there are punishments. You don't listen to the teacher in class, there are punishments. You don't do this, there are punishments that you face, right? In your work, if you cross certain boundaries, you don't show up, you don't do this, you don't do that, there's probably going to be some punishment that you're going to face, whatever it may be. Similarly, you have to do that in self-discipline yourself, mu'aqabah. Let's say that if I say a bad word, $1 in sadaqah, $5 in sadaqah. When that money starts depleting and your bank account keeps going down, you're like, subhanAllah, let me be quiet, it's better. Or someone said that anytime someone has the habit of smoking, they were trying. The shaykh told them, don't leave smoking, but every time you smoke 1 cigarette, pray 2 rak'ahs. One day, the first day, 1 pack. Man, he did tarawih. And the next day, 10. Next day, 8, 6. Khalas. He said, yeah, I don't want to do this no more. Because every time I have to pray. وَإِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ. But there are examples where you shouldn't self-discipline yourself, where then you're harming yourself. That every time you commit a sin, khalas, you just destroy some property of yours. A'udhu billah. There was in Talbis Iblis, a book by Ibn al-Qayyim, I think Ibn al-Qayyim, if I remember. I read a long time ago. Ibn al-Qayyim or Ibn al-Jawzi, one of those two. Because he's Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah, and then there's Ibn al-Jawzi, one or the other. Talbis Iblis, the tricks of Iblis, basically how he kind of tricks people. There's a story that he mentions there where there was a young man who, after committing a sin with his hand, he did something he shouldn't have done. No need to go in detail. He burned his hand as punishment. This is shaitan's work. This is not self-disciplining yourself, okay? Mu'aqabah should come in light of sharia, okay? Similar to how Abu Lubaba radiallahu an, where he did the sin, he just tied himself and he said, I'm going to stay here until Allah forgives me. And so Allah forgave him. So it should be within the boundaries of sharia. I'm going to repeat them again, okay? Musharata, making a covenant with yourself. Muraqabah, holding yourself accountable throughout the day. Muhasabah, holding yourself to account at the end of the day. And then mu'aqabah, that if you fail to do certain things, then you discipline yourself. Mu'aqabah. اللهم اجعلنا من أهل القرآن الذين هم أهلك وخاصتك. اللهم اجعل القرآن ربيع قلوبنا ونور صدورنا وجلاء أحزاننا وذهاب همومنا وغمومنا. اللهم زين أخلاقنا بالأخلاق المحمدية. اللهم ارزقنا الإخلاص المحمدي والتواضع المحمدي والصبر المحمدي والفتح المحمدي والتواضع المحمدي والتوكل المحمدي. وصلى اللهم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, if there's any questions, I'll take them. بإذن الله تعالى. If there's any questions, Bismillah.
So you mentioned that if we do bad practice, and then if other people are going to follow that, we also get the kind of bad whatever punishment.
Yes.
So if the person do tawbah,
Yes.
what will happen to them?
So of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept their tawbah, and then the people that practice it after, inshallah, that habl, that rope will be cut off because they did sincere tawbah. But then we also have to remember that the consequences of the dunya, they remain. Akhirah, Allah is merciful, Ar-Rahman. But let's say someone, there might be, and there's a lot of influencers now, they might do something, and because they're very, very famous, they put themselves online and they publicize their sins. When you publicize your sins and you're very famous on the internet, that thing never gets wiped off. So even if you do tawbah to Allah, you do repent, you then do go back to being a good person, there's still people being influenced by that old lifestyle that you had, and there's still traces of those sins. So that's why I always warn young people that be very careful what you put out online, because if it happens in person, khalas, it happens, people will forget, you'll move on. But if it's online, it will be haunting you for the rest of your life. And we see that, so something to be very, very careful about. What we leave and influence others, especially now with online, where the influence is not influencing 2-3 people, it's rather hundreds of thousands sometimes. May Allah protect us, Ya Rabb. Any other questions? Inshallah. Bismillah.
I have a question.
Bismillah.
When we were young in Pakistan, our Dinia teacher, she would point out there are 8 mubeens in this surah. I don't know if there's any, at its end selected 8 ayahs and the mubeen. And she helped us memorize. She said, that would be, I don't know if that means, it's a good tool to memorize.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
People have different memorization techniques and whatnot. For me, I never use these techniques. You just memorize, it's through repetition. You ask majority of huffaz, they don't know 8 mubeens here, 20 mubeens here, 10 this, that. It's very difficult to remember these concepts. Sometimes it helps some people, maybe. But for myself at least, I feel that the more I try to follow the details of the Quran rather than just relying on my memory, I actually start forgetting more. Because then I get confused, I confuse myself. But if I just memorize it, not knowing that there's 8 mubeens, it just flows. So at least that's for me, and that's the advice that I've seen work best with students. And if there's something that's particularly bothering you in your memorization, where you're getting this ayah confused with that ayah, then that's when you can study both of the differences, and then it'll help. But if it's not bothering you and your memory is already not being disrupted by that, then there's no point. As for, is there anything unique about mubeen being mentioned 8 times in the surah? I haven't looked into it yet. Maybe perhaps as I proceed in the surah, something might clear up mubeen, Barakallahu feekum, inshallah. I'll take one more question, inshallah. If there's anything. No? Khalas, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum.
Feel free to take some food.
Jazakumullah khair.